Hi, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Malice in the Mitten. I'm your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Trace. I'm sad a little bit because you were here last week and now you're not, and now we're back to just phone calls.
I know. Leaving is always weird.
I know. It sucks.
Yeah, but it was a good time.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. It'll hold us over till the next get together.
I don't know about that, but okay, we'll go with it.
All right. Well, today we're not just talking about murder. We're talking about control, perception, and a man who believed he was doing the right thing. Now, Michigan holds its stories close in its quiet towns, along its shorelines, and sometimes in the people who leave, because not every monster stays where they're made. Some take their darkness with them.
Now, before we begin, we want to take a moment for a content warning. This episode contains discussions of family annihilation, including the murder of children, as well as themes of domestic abuse, mental illness, and psychological trauma. Please take care while listening, and if you need to pause, step away, and skip this episode, we completely understand.
Now, today's story was written and researched by Rebecca Hiers. And as always, we are honored to bring her work to you. So let's get into it. While Michigan is the place of some famous murders, it is also the home to some famous murderers that brought malice to other states. Like Henry Lee Lucas, the confession killer, murdered his mother while living at his sister's home in Tecumseh. H.H. Holmes, often called America's first serial killer, attended medical school at the University of Michigan. Eileen Wuornos, the most famous serial killer, was from the Detroit area. And today, let's take a look at another killer from Michigan, a man who murdered his mother, his wife, and his children, and who spent the next 18 years living life as another man. John Frederick List was born in Frankenmuth, Michigan, in Saginaw County in 1844. In 1866, he married Maria Hubinger. The couple had 3 children. In 1923, Maria died at age 58, and the following year, he married Alma Florence, a woman 23 years his junior. John was 57. Alma was only 34. A year after they married, Alma gave birth to their only child, a son, whom they named John Emil List in Bay City, Michigan. The elder John was not known to be a friendly person. He expected perfection from his young son, but also wanted to have nothing to do with him. He didn't call John Jr. by his name, but referred to him as the boy when speaking of him. If he needed John Jr. to know something, he had his wife tell him. Devoutly religious, John Sr. expected John Jr. to be clean, tidy, excel at school, and to closely follow the tenets of their church, a Lutheran church of German origin. John Sr., who operated a local grocery store, just didn't like children and was of the opinion that children should be seen and not heard.
Oh, that line always gets me. I had an uncle that said that one time about me when I was like 7, and it was literally just because I went to go ask my mother a question. And to this day, anytime I hear that line, it reeks of steeped generational indoctrination of BS, because it tells you everything about that environment that he grew up in. There was no warmth, no connection, just a bunch of self-righteous adults with expectations, impossible expectations, and the assumption of control. And that kind of upbringing, it doesn't just get over itself. It literally needs to be worked on. And like, that's like a trauma dive when you have that kind of upbringing, because it literally can shape everything about the rest of your life. It can shape everything about your personality.
Exactly. And it's a horrible thing to think about children, and for children to hear that from someone that's supposed to love them.
Right.
It's horrible. Now, Alma was just the opposite. She would be what we would call a helicopter parent today. Afraid of John catching an illness, he wasn't even allowed to play with other children.
Either way he went, he either had emotional distance, control, and all that stuff. And then on the other side, he had suffocating control. He couldn't do anything. He was in a bubble. That's not balance. That's pressure from both sides. And pressure like that, it can only build over time.
Yeah, and nothing good is going to come out of it.
Unfortunately, I don't think so.
Right. Now, an honor roll student, John graduated from Bay City Central High School. Alma and John Jr. would read the Bible together every night. It was a lonely childhood for the young boy, and after graduation, John saw a chance to escape. World War II was going on, and he joined the Army over Alma's objections. He would become a laboratory technician in the Army. Now, John Sr.'s father died in 1944, and John Jr. came back for the funeral. The few friends he did have noticed a change in him. The quiet boy who, growing up, tried to blend into the background now just seemed cold and unfeeling, not showing any grief at the death of his father. And when the war was over, John returned to Alma, and the two continued to read their Bible every night. Wanting a secure future for her son, Alma encouraged him to go into accounting. Now, he would earn a bachelor's degree in business administration and a master's in accounting at the University of Michigan. While he attended U of M, Alma would come and visit him once a month, and they would go to dinner and church together. The Korean War started, and John was called back to service. While not sent to Korea, he did serve in Virginia. One night, in October of 1951, he went to a bowling alley and met Helen Taylor. Now, Helen was a recent widow and a mother of a 9-year-old daughter named Brenda. Married to her first husband in 1941, she had also given birth to 2 sons that died young. One lived for 1 day, one for 2 months. Her husband was killed in Korea in April of 1951. Now, who knows what draws 2 people together? Was Helen in love? Or did she just not want to face raising a child as a single mother? Either way, Helen told John she was pregnant, and 2 months after they met, in December of 1951, the two married. Now, there was trouble with the pair right from the beginning. It started when Helen admitted that she had never been pregnant. It was further exacerbated by the fact that Alma felt that John had married beneath him. Helen didn't belong to their church. Her children died, and she had another child by another man. Helen was simply not good enough for her son. Helen, for her part, didn't really like Alma either. John was caught between the 2 women, one that lied and one that smothered him.
That whole relationship, it started with a lie. It never really can recover from that initial lie. And you can almost feel John getting pulled between the two completely different worlds, but both just as toxic. Neither of which he really knows how to handle it either way.
That's right. Now, although John and Helen were in Virginia and Alma was in Michigan, this would soon change. The military sent John to California, and he insisted that his mother come with them. Now, after his discharge from the Army, the little family moved to Detroit. There, Helen gave birth to John's first child, a daughter. They named Patricia in 1955. Now, after the birth of Patty, Alma softened her attitude toward Helen. Obtaining a better job, John moved the family to Kalamazoo, where their second child, John Frederick, was born in 1956. Now, although Alma's attitude had softened somewhat, things were still tense in the List household. Brenda was a teen girl and acting out. Helen and Brenda were becoming estranged. Things went back to being tense with Alma and Helen. And Helen refused to attend church with John, and he became resentful. Faith was very important to him. He still read his Bible every night with his mother, but Helen was having none of that. In 1959, Helen gave birth to their last child, Frederick Michael. To cope with the tensions in the house, Helen began to drink and neglect the children. Her words became sharp and hurtful. Soon, she became addicted to tranquilizers and spent more money than John earned.
This is where it all starts to feel like everything is unraveling all at once. However, the both of them have always been controlling of him in their own rights, in their own ways. And now there's children and angst between the two of them, and everything in his life is just bubbling over. Another thing is when they're not getting along, he's probably always torn between the two control things. It's definitely a pressure cooker. He's internalizing all of this, and that's the dangerous part. So you're about to tell me that he just loses his shit and murders everybody? Is that what's happening?
You're getting ahead of yourself, but yes.
Okay.
Now, John's resentment, as you can imagine, kept growing. He was meek and mild and rigid. His wife's attitude angered him, but he didn't react. Not yet. Appearances were everything to him, and Helen wasn't living up to his expectations. When the company John worked for merged with another, John lost his job. Then he accepted a job with Xerox and moved the family to New York. And Helen continued to overspend and began to despise John. Their family was falling apart.
Okay, but Helen really is just following John's lead about putting up a front for society's sake and not paying attention to your own households, because they needed everything to look successful. So she was overspending, and he was worried about that as well, even when everything's falling apart. I mean, it's ironically, in a weird, twisted, toxic way, the American way. Worry about what the Joneses have, compete with them, and then make believe it's all fantastic over here. That's something that we see today rampant on steroids. We see that today. But for him, it wasn't just pride. It was his identity also. And if that image cracked, everything did.
And boy, was it about to crack. Now, at Xerox, John's job was the director of accounting services. However, he was a poor leader, described as dour, strict, and lacking any personal skills that make a good manager. So he was let go after 4 years. He then found work at the First National Bank of Jersey City as their vice president and comptroller. Finances were bad, but appearances were everything. So when they moved to Jersey City, he borrowed money from Alma to make the down payment on a home called Breeze Knoll at 431 Hillside Avenue, purchased for about $50,000, which in today's money is roughly $450,000. Breeze Knoll was a 19-room Georgian-style mansion built in the late 1890s, and it screamed wealth and success. 3 stories tall, it contained an intercom system, 10 fireplaces, 2 living rooms, a kitchen with a butler's pantry, but most importantly, a ballroom. A ballroom with a stained glass skylight. It was the perfect place to keep up appearances of a God-fearing, upright, well-to-do family. And Alma took up residence on the top floor of the house, and the rest of the family lived in the sprawling mansion below. Brenda would soon marry and leave the house. John became a Sunday school teacher at Redeemer Lutheran Church, which he and the children attended. To the outside world, they were a typical, stable, loving family. But in the big house on the hill, behind closed doors, things were spiraling. John's social ineptness would cost him his job at the bank in only 1 year. Ashamed to tell Helen, feeling like a failure, John would awaken every morning, get dressed, and leave the house. He would spend the next 8 hours each day sitting at the train station or the park, reading the newspaper, or sleeping. Unable to pay the huge bills, he began to take money from Alma's accounts. That would total over $200,000. So he took out a second mortgage to try and help with finances, but nothing was working for him. He tried working for himself, selling mutual funds from home. While he was good at accounting, once again, his personality killed the business. With foreclosures looming and seeing what he saw as shameful food banks in his family's future, John felt his control slipping away. Now, for a man that needed to be in control, it was devastating. Much like a rubber band, pulled beyond its capacity, the rigid, unyielding John was about to snap. When Helen's first husband had died, he had left her more than just Barbara. He had also left her with syphilis, which, with the drinking and drug abuse, was making her behavior erratic and unpredictable. Her tongue became sharper. She was overheard to tell John that he was half the man her first husband was. She taunted him. At a visit to her doctor, she was diagnosed as having cerebral atrophy. And by 1971, she was mostly bedbound. The two slept in different rooms. John was advised to have her placed in an institution, but he refused. It would break up the image of the perfect family. The children were growing away from the church as they aged. Patty wanted to become an actress, a godless profession in the eyes of John List. It was the late 1960s, an era of free love, short skirts, go-go boots, drugs, and rebellion. And the 16-year-old Patty seemed to be embracing it. John knew if this was allowed, her soul would go to hell. Against his wishes, Patty had enrolled in drama classes at school. Patty and John fought constantly over this. The boys were also getting into their teenage years and doing their own little rebellions. John knew if they continued on their paths, they would not get into heaven when they died. They would no longer be pure or innocent.
Well, you can start feeling the pattern here. It's like everything's tightening, pulling towards something inevitable. But I think it's kind of scary that all this time he's still functioning. But then again, it's just your way of telling stories that it alludes to this buildup, which is awesome. But I don't know. He's still going through all the motions like nothing else is wrong.
And on November 5th, 1971, John had a strange conversation with his children. After dinner, he asked them if they wanted to be buried or cremated when they died. Patty was 16, John was 15, Frederick was 13, and they were taken aback. The three managed to say, buried. John looked at each of them, turned and walked away. Patty and John thought their father was going to kill them. Patty would tell her drama teacher that if she ever didn't show up, her father had killed her. He thought she was kidding.
That moment right there, you shouldn't take anybody. I don't know, but then again, kids say, my father's gonna kill me. And you probably wouldn't think that much of it because you're like, no, you'll be fine. Your father loves you as an outside stranger. But that's strange, and it's slightly terrifying to give that more thought. And the fact that Patty said it out loud and she was actually fearing it and no one stopped it, I'm assuming. You keep telling me I'm getting ahead of myself, but we all know that's where this is going, right? So that's one of those moments that just stays with you,
Yeah, it does. And that must have been, I just don't even know what that would be like to go to school that fearful, to actually say it. She felt it. She felt it was coming. And on November 9th, 1971, that day started as a normal day in the List household. The three children went to school. John got up and dressed in his customary suit and tie. Helen eventually came downstairs and sat in the kitchen, looking out the window while eating her breakfast. Coming out from an office, John snuck up behind her. Helen, sensing movement, turned her head just as he pulled the trigger on his gun. He shot her once in the jaw. She fell, hitting the table, then the floor, and died in a pool of blood. Leaving her on the floor, John went to the third story to his mother's room. She too was getting ready for the day with breakfast. She asked John, what was that noise? But instead of answering, he shot her over her left eye. Alma was a large woman, and John struggled to move her. Originally, he was wanting to bring her downstairs. He finally realized that he couldn't move her. So he wrapped her in a carpet runner and pulled her body into a storage area. He then attempted to clean up the scene. Once he had cleaned up, to his satisfaction, he returned to the downstairs kitchen. Taking Helen by the ankles, he dragged her into the ballroom, leaving behind a 40-foot trail of blood and bodily fluids. Opening sleeping bags, he placed Helen's body on one, face down. He then covered her body with a bath towel and her head with a kitchen towel. As with his mother, he attempted to clean up the mess. Looking down, he noticed he was covered in blood.
There's like a crazy level of detachment here, it sounds like. The way he moves from one act to the next, it's not rage. It's methodical, like he has a plan. And somehow that makes it all worse. He's not a bomb exploding. He was like an orchestrated, timed event.
Yeah, and he had plenty of time to plan it all out.
Creepy.
He was sick. Slowly, he walked up the stairs and entered Helen's bedroom. He sat on her bed, wiping his bloody hands on her sheets. Now, police would later find bloody handprints on the toilet lid where he held it as he threw up, getting his emotions under control. Cold, calculating John List, removed his bloody clothes and dropped them into a pile on the floor. He took a shower, put on a new suit and tie, called in sick to work, called his children's place of employment, wrote letters to the schools excusing his children for the next month, and with that chore list done, he went out to rake leaves. And yes, he did that in a suit and tie. He made himself lunch, and as he ate it, the phone rang. It was Patty. She wasn't feeling well and wanted to come home early. So before John left to get her, he placed his gun where he could easily reach it. Returning with Patty, he entered the house first. He hid behind the door, and when she entered and walked past him, he fired one shot to the back of her head. Dragging his dead daughter down the hallway, he placed her next to her mother in the ballroom. He then went and cleaned up the mess, including the mess on himself. He then went and mailed the letters he had written earlier that day. He would also cancel all deliveries to the home, like milk and papers and mail.
That is so eerily, especially because you said earlier that the teacher said, if I don't ever come back, my father killed me. And then she calls to come home early, and her father kills her. That's just crazy. I don't even know what to say about that. Like, talk about dumb luck, right?
Right.
And the fact that she didn't feel well, maybe she was having a premonition that her father was losing his mind and killing off her family.
Could have been.
So, like, she probably didn't legitimately feel well, but going home was absolutely the wrong thing.
Absolutely the wrong thing. Now, Frederick, although young, he had a part-time job after work. And as he didn't drive, John went out and picked him up. As with Patty, he hurried into the house before his son and hid behind the door again. As with Patty, as Frederick walked past him, he fired one shot into the back of his head. Now, Frederick was still wearing his coat, and he was placed next to his mother and sister in the ballroom. Then John Jr. came home from soccer practice much sooner than his father expected him to, and the mess from the earlier murders wasn't all cleaned up. Not wanting his son to see the mess and run, John Sr. waited, gun raised by the door. As his son entered, he fired. John Jr. had noticed the gun and reached out to stop his father. The two struggled, with the son breaking free. As he turned to run out the door, his father shot him in the back and in his head. And as he fell, he broke his jaw. Not yet dead, he began to crawl, then turned onto his back. As he stared up at his father shot him in the eye, but he still did not die. John List would shoot his son a total of 10 times before finally determining his son was dead.
That moment, that fight, where his son tries and stops him, there's something deeply unhuman in that, and devastating how coldly and then frustratedly, because obviously the last few shots, he got to 10. The last few shots were just done out of rage.
It's so horrible. It's so horrible. Now, John Jr. would join his siblings and mother in the ballroom. John covered each face with a towel, then prayed over their bodies.
Now, isn't that irony at its god darn finest?
Mhm.
Praying after doing all that. That's something I don't understand. I don't understand how anybody even begins to understand that.
Yeah, me either. But you'll find out why he did.
Ugh.
Yeah. Now, after cleaning himself up yet again, he called his church and told his pastor that there was a family emergency, and the family was headed to North Carolina. He said he would be unable to keep his commitment to teach Sunday school the next week, and that they would be gone for a while. His mother-in-law was very ill, and she really was ill. He then called Patty's drama coach and said they were going on vacation. Now, the coach would remember what Patty had told them the previous week with a sick feeling. After his phone calls were made, John List sat and wrote letters that he would leave behind, explaining why he had done what he had done. He then made dinner and went to bed not far from where his family lay. The next morning at dawn, he turned the thermostat down, put church organ music playing on the intercom system, turned on every light in the house, packed a suitcase, and with $2,500 of his mother's money, and he left. Now, before long, the lights in the house began to burn out. Nobody was seen coming or going. The drama coach, Patty's drama coach, begged the police to investigate, but there was no evidence of anything wrong. John had sent letters to everyone to explain the family's disappearance. As the lights began to burn out, a neighbor got concerned enough to call the police. Finding an open window, police entered the home. What an eerie scene it must have been for the police when they entered it on December 7th, 1971. The temperatures in the house rivaled those of the outdoors. It was dark. The rooms were covered in blood. Church music still played on unseen speakers. The smell of 5 bodies decomposing for a month. Then they discovered the bodies in the ballroom.
Could you imagine walking into that house? The cold, the music playing over the speakers, the stench of decomposing bodies after a month? That kind of scene will probably never left those police officers.
Exactly, and all I can think about is the Robesons.
Yeah, I remember.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't have air conditioning, so
That's right.
they just smelled putrid.
Mm-hmm.
These people, they had that mortuary science thing going with putridness.
Yeah,
That's a foul smell.
Yeah. Now, an investigation was immediately launched, but no sign of John List could be found. A letter he had left behind for his pastor said that he had murdered his family to prevent them from living in a life of shame and poverty, and to save their souls before it was too late for them to get to heaven.
Oh, so now you're going to tell me that he believes he was saving them? Now he's that kind of religious wackadoo?
Mm-hmm.
That just makes things even more disturbing. See, I don't know. I think that's what he's trying to pawn it off to be, just gets busted. That in his mind, it wasn't cruelty. It was mercy. I think that's just, insane people's way of trying to rationalize their crime. That's just narcissism.
Yeah. Now, John would later say he didn't commit suicide after killing his family, as that would bar him from his entrance to heaven. But he could ask for forgiveness for murder and still get in, so the manhunt began. But John had left no trail. His car was found at the long-term parking area of Kennedy Airport, but there was no sign of where he had gone. He could be anywhere, as his passport was also missing from the home. 9 months after the discovery, Breeze Knoll fell victim to an arsonist and burned to the ground. Now, whoever burned it has never been discovered. After the murders, John changed his name to Robert Clark, a name he remembered of a classmate at the University of Michigan. He then moved to Colorado and under that name with a false social security number, obtained a job at a Holiday Inn as a cook, and by 1975, he was comfortable enough and felt that he had gotten away with his crime that he joined a church and became an accountant again. In 1976, he got a new driver's license and bought a car. In his life in Michigan and the East Coast, he always wore a suit and tie. But in his new life, it was jeans and button-up shirts. He took up dancing. He attended singles socials. And at one social, he met Dolores Miller, telling Dolores his wife had died of cancer, and soon the two were married in 1985. He could run from his murders, but he couldn't run from himself. His personality continued to be the bane of his existence. He lost his job as an accountant because he couldn't keep up with a changing world. He lost his post as a Sunday school teacher because he was too rigid and demanding of his pupils. So he went back to wearing suits and ties. And at 55, with an unyielding personality, John found it hard to find a new job. Like before, money became an issue, and Dolores threatened to leave. Now, Dolores had a friend and neighbor named Wanda, and Wanda loved the tabloids. And one day, while at the store, she picked up a copy of World Weekly News. And in the tabloid was an article about a killer from the East Coast named John List. It gave personality quirks about the killer. Now, as Rhonda read the article, she recognized her neighbor. So while waiting for Robert to leave the house, she took the paper to Dolores. But Dolores threw the paper away after Rhonda left. John was unable to find work in Colorado that was lasting, but did manage to get a job in Richmond, Virginia. So the pair packed up and moved back east. Now, while the cold case was not forgotten, in the 80s, the television show, and one I used to watch all the time, America's Most Wanted, was really popular. And one of the original investigators of the crime had seen the show and wondered if it would help close the case. So he contacted the show to see about airing a segment on John List. But there was a problem. There were no photos of John List that were current. Nobody knew what he looked like. So there's a man named Frank Bender. He was a photographer and sculptor in Philadelphia, and he specialized in recreating faces of unrecognizable bodies that had been found. Now, working with profilers, old photographs, and his own skill, Bender created a bust of List for the show. Now, the show aired May 22nd, 1989, and 22 million people watched it that night. List and Dolores were at a church social, and while he was a regular watcher, he missed this episode. But Wanda didn't miss it. Contacting her son-in-law, she had him make the call. Now, the FBI showed up at the home of the Clarks on June 1st. Dolores showed the agents her wedding photo, and they knew they had their man. Going to his place of work, they arrested and fingerprinted him. Now, despite his denials, the fingerprints didn't lie. And he was 63 years old, and he had been on the run for 18 years.
18 years. Working, living, getting married again. That's not hiding in the shadows. That's living a whole damn life. And in the end, it wasn't some grand investigation. It was recognition from, of all places, America's Most Wanted. I love that this is an American Most Wanted show. That's awesome, because I think everybody watched that in the 80s. So a neighbor, a moment that she had a while back with the magazine, and then now a feeling that something's just not right. I love that she did that.
I do too. Now, John went to trial in New Jersey and was found guilty on April 12, 1990, of 5 counts of murder. He was sentenced to life without parole, and he died in prison in 2008 at the age of 82. And nobody claimed his body, and it is believed he is buried on the prison grounds. Well, there's nobody to claim it.
Yeah, he killed them all, or he stunned them into complete shock that they were married to a murderer. Mm-hmm. I wonder if she did the spin-off, I'm married to a murderer.
Right. Now, in an ironic twist, it was later discovered that the ballroom that had sheltered the bodies of the List family, above them, if you remember, I mentioned there was a big stained glass skylight in the ceiling. Now, that glass was signed by Tiffany Payne. And in 1971, it was valued at $100,000, which in today's money was $770,000. It's almost $1 million.
So that burned down?
Yeah. So remember the arsonist? So it's all gone. But while they were living there, if he'd just looked up, he could have found a way out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't think to look up, I guess.
But I kind of love that metaphor for everyone that's in turmoil. Take a look around. There's another way out of your situation. Mm-hmm. There's always another way. You don't have to harm anyone or kill anyone. There's always an answer to whatever is going wrong.
Yeah, murder's never the answer.
Yeah, murder's never the answer.
No. Now, John List believed he was restoring order, saving souls, preserving dignity. But what he really left behind was silence. 5 lives erased, a home burned to the ground, and a story that still asks the same question. What happens when control becomes everything?
The answer to that question is you lose everything.
That's right.
You can't control anything but yourself. If you or anyone you know is facing domestic abuse and need help, please contact the National Domestic Abuse Hotline at 1-800-799-7233 or visit thehotline.org. You are not alone.
Now, telling these stories matter, and they deserve to be told completely. So thank you for listening as always. Please like, share, subscribe, and give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. So we will see you all back on Wednesday for Round Robin. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.